Use headphones for the best experience.
People keep asking me why I went looking for him, as if the answer isn't obvious. He was my brother. He'd been missing for 11 days. The search and rescue teams had pulled out after day 6, and the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office had moved his file from active search to long-term missing persons, which is a polite way of saying they'd stopped. Our mother was in a memory care facility in Bend and didn't understand what was happening when we tried to explain it. Our father had been dead for 9 years. There was no one else. So I drove up from Medford on a Thursday morning in October with a backpack, a paper map of the trail system, and the kind of stupid, desperate certainty that only exists when the alternative is sitting at home waiting for a phone call that might never come. My brother's name was Eli. He was 34, 2 years younger than me, and he was the kind of person that outdoors people respect. Not a weekend hiker, not a gear collector, not someone who posted summit photos for attention. He'd been working seasonal trail maintenance for the Forest Service since he was 22. He knew the Cascades the way a plumber knows a building's pipes, not from maps but from being inside the system, year after year, walking the same ground in every season until the landscape was something he carried in his body. He didn't get lost. That was the part nobody said out loud, but everyone was thinking. People like Eli don't get lost. He'd gone out on September 28th to do a solo assessment of a trail segment in the Broken Top Wilderness area, about 15 miles southwest of Bend. It was routine work, checking drainage, flagging down trees, and noting erosion points for the winter crew. The trail was called the Soda Creek Loop, and it ran about 9 miles through old-growth forest, up along a ridge, and back down to the trailhead parking lot. Eli had hiked it dozens of times. He'd told his supervisor he'd be back by 4 p.m. When he wasn't back by 6, the supervisor called it in. When his truck was still at the trailhead at nightfall, they launched the search. Dogs, helicopter ground teams. They covered the trail in a 2-mile radius on either side. They found his pack at mile marker 5, leaning against a Douglas fir about 30 feet off the main trail, with his water, his radio, his lunch, and his assessment clipboard still inside. Everything was orderly, nothing was torn or damaged. It looked like he'd set it down carefully, the way you'd set down a bag when you've arrived somewhere and don't need it anymore. They didn't find him. What they did find on day 4 was his camera. It was a compact digital camera, a Canon PowerShot, an older model, the kind with a flip screen that he'd carried for years to document trail conditions. It was on the ground about 50 yards past where the pack had been, further off trail, at the edge of a section of forest that the search teams described in their report as dense, unmanaged, old growth, with significant canopy cover reducing GPS accuracy. The camera was undamaged. The battery was dead. They bagged it, logged it, and gave it to the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office gave it to me when I drove up on day 8 to sign paperwork. I didn't look at the photos immediately. I took the camera back to the motel in Bend where I was staying, and I set it on the nightstand, and I sat on the bed and looked at it for a long time. Then I plugged it into the charger I'd brought. Eli and I had the same model. He'd given me mine years ago, and I went to get food and tried not to think about it. When I got back, the camera had enough charge to turn on. I sat on the bed and opened the photo gallery. There were 143 images. The first 100 or so were what I expected. Trail photos, drainage culverts, erosion cuts down trees blocking the path, a washed-out section near a creek crossing. Standard documentation, the kind Eli had taken 1,000 times. Each photo was time-stamped. They started at 8:47 a.m. on September 28th and progressed chronologically along the trail, matching the mile markers, consistent with a normal pace. Photo 101 was taken at 11:14 a.m. near mile marker 5. It showed a section of trail where a large fir had fallen across the path, normal. Photo 102 was taken at 11:16 a.m. It was pointed off trail, into the trees. There was no obvious subject, just forest, trunks, ferns, the dark understory that forms under the old-growth canopy where the light doesn't reach the ground. I might have scrolled past it, except that Eli didn't take pointless photos. Every image on his camera existed for a reason. He wasn't someone who photographed scenery. He photographed problems. Photo 103, 11:16 a.m. Same direction, slightly further into the trees. Same dark understory. No clear subject. Photo 104, 11:17 a.m. Deeper. The trees were thicker here, the light lower. I still couldn't see what he was photographing. Photo 105, 11:17 a.m. And here I stopped, because in the lower right corner of the frame, barely visible against the dark ground, there was a trail. Not the Soda Creek Loop, a different trail, narrow, unpaved, more like a deer path or an old game trail, cutting through the undergrowth at an angle that moved away from the main loop and deeper into the forest. It was faint. If you weren't looking for it, you'd walk right past it. But it was there, a line of compressed earth, a slight parting of the ferns, the kind of path that forms when something walks the same route again and again. Eli had seen it, and he'd stepped off the main trail to photograph it. Photos 106 through 118 were taken over the next 40 minutes, and they documented Eli following the path. The timestamps showed a slow, methodical pace, a photo every 2 or 3 minutes. The forest got denser. The canopy closed overhead. The light dropped to a dim green-gray. The path stayed consistent, narrow but clear, winding between the trunks with the easy, organic curves of something that had been used for a long time. I want to describe what I saw in these photos carefully, because the thing that disturbed me wasn't any single image. It was the sequence. It was the way the photos changed. 107, 108. Eli was clearly documenting the path itself. The camera was pointed down or forward along the trail. The photos were practical and observational, the kind of thing he'd take to show his supervisor, "Hey, there's an unmarked trail out here. Might need to check it out." But starting around photo 110, the camera angle shifted. The photos were no longer pointed at the path. They were pointed at the forest on either side of the path. And the forest, in these photos, was wrong. I don't mean wrong in a dramatic way. I mean wrong in the way that a room is wrong when one piece of furniture has been moved 2 inches to the left. The trees were spaced differently. In the earlier photos, the old-growth forest had the random organic spacing you'd expect. Trees growing where they'd found light, at uneven distances, some close together, some far apart. In photos 110 onward, the trees were evenly spaced. Not perfectly, not like a plantation, but close enough that it registered, like the forest was remembering a pattern it had once been planted in and was slowly returning to it. Photo 113 showed something else. On the trunk of a fir at about chest height, there was a mark. Not a blaze, not the kind of cut trail workers make to mark a route. It was a smooth oval depression in the bark, about the size of a palm, where the wood was lighter and slightly concave, as if something had pressed against the tree repeatedly in the same spot over many years and worn it down. The next photo, 114, showed another mark on another tree a few yards further. Same shape, same height. Photo 116 was the one I kept coming back to. It showed the path ahead, curving gently to the left, and in the distance, maybe 40 yards, there was a clearing. Not a meadow or a natural opening. A clearing in the sense that the trees stopped and there was a space, and in that space there was light, the first real light since the canopy had closed, falling in a bright column that looked almost solid against the surrounding dark. Eli had photographed the clearing from a distance. He hadn't gone in yet, but even from 40 yards, I could see that the ground inside the clearing was different. It wasn't the forest floor. It was flat, level, bare, like the ground had been swept. Photos 117 and 118 were closer. The clearing was maybe 20 feet across, roughly circular. The trees around its edge were the same evenly spaced firs, and each one had the oval depression on its trunk, all at the same height, all facing inward toward the center of the clearing. The ground was pale, compacted dirt, not soil, not duff, just hard, smooth, light-colored earth, like the floor of a root cellar. There was nothing in the clearing. No structure, no object, no sign, just the empty space and the light coming down through the gap in the canopy and the worn spots on the trees looking inward like closed eyes. Photo 118 was the last photo with a normal timestamp. 12:03 p.m., September 28th. Same timestamp, but the image was different. It was taken from inside the clearing, looking back the way Eli had come. The path was visible, trailing away into the dark understory, and standing on the path, about 20 feet from the clearing's edge, there was a person. I stared at the screen for a long time. The person was facing the clearing, facing the camera. They were standing in the deep shade of the canopy, so the details were muddy, but I could see enough. They were tall. They were standing very still. Their arms were at their sides, and their proportions were not quite right. The torso slightly too long, the legs slightly too short. Or maybe it was the other way around. The shade made it hard to tell, but something about the silhouette didn't sit comfortably in my vision, the way a word you've misspelled looks wrong before you can identify the error. I told myself it was another hiker, someone Eli had encountered on the trail, but the posture was wrong. People in the woods don't stand at attention with their arms at their sides, motionless, facing a stranger with the camera. People wave. People shift their weight. People look alive. Photo 120. Same timestamp. 12:03 p.m. The person was closer, maybe 10 feet from the clearing's edge now. Same posture. Same stillness. But they'd moved forward without the photo capturing any intermediate position. They'd been 20 feet away, and now they were 10, and both photos read 12:03 p.m. The person was at the edge of the clearing, right at the line where the trees ended, and the bare ground began. They hadn't stepped into the clearing. They were standing at its border, and now I could see more detail, and I wished I couldn't. The person wasn't wearing clothes exactly. They were wearing something that looked like clothes from a distance, but resolved, up close, into a texture that was more like bark, or skin that had the pattern of bark. The face was in shadow, but the shape of it was oblong and smooth, and where the eyes should have been, there were two oval depressions, like the marks on the trees, and they were aimed at the camera. I put the camera down. I went to the bathroom, ran cold water on my wrists, looked at myself in the mirror, and breathed. Then I went back and looked at the remaining photos. Photos 122 through 138 were all time-stamped, 12:03 p.m., September 28th. 17 photos in a single minute, or in no time at all. They showed the figure standing at the edge of the clearing. It didn't enter. In each photo, it was in a slightly different position. Head tilted, weight shifted, one hand raised a few inches, but it never crossed the border. The clearing, whatever it was, seemed to be a boundary. The figure stood at the edge and looked in, and Eli stood inside and took photos, and neither of them moved closer. I drove to the Soda Creek Loop trailhead the next morning. I parked next to the space where Eli's truck had been. I put on my pack and started hiking. I want to tell you that I went in afraid, that every step felt like a fight, but the truth is more complicated and more unsettling. The trail was beautiful. October in the Cascades is sharp-aired and golden, and the old-growth forest smelled like cold sap and wet earth, and the light came through the canopy in long moving shafts that made the ferns glow. I walked, and I felt calm. I felt the particular peace that Eli had always described when he talked about the woods, the sense that the forest was large and complete, and that being inside it was enough. I hadn't felt that feeling in years. I'd been living in Medford, working at a tire shop, going through the same days in the same order. And somewhere in the repetition, the world had gotten small and dry. Walking the Soda Creek Loop, I understood why Eli had made the forest his life. I understood why he went back every season. The understanding sat in me like a warm stone, and I didn't question it. I reached mile marker 5 at 11:20 a.m. I stood where the search team had found Eli's pack. I looked into the trees. The path was there. It was exactly as it appeared in the photos. Narrow, faint, cutting through the undergrowth at an angle. A line of compressed earth. A parting of the ferns. If you weren't looking for it, you'd miss it completely. I stood at the edge of the main trail and looked at the path and felt something I'm going to describe as honestly as I can. It wasn't fear. It wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. The path looked familiar, the way a road looks familiar when you've driven it in a dream and then encounter it in waking life. I had never been here before, but looking at the path, I felt the gentle, insistent tug of something that had been waiting for me to arrive, and the feeling was not threatening. The feeling was welcoming. The feeling was, here you are, finally. I took one step off the main trail, and then I stopped. I stopped because of a small, stupid, ordinary thing. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from the tire shop. Hey man, you coming back Monday? Darren needs to know for scheduling. I looked at the screen. I read the words. And the spell, I don't know what else to call it, broke. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough. Enough to make me look up from the phone and see the path again, and realize that I'd been about to walk into the forest alone, without telling anyone where I was going, in the exact same spot where my brother had disappeared 11 days ago. And I'd been feeling good about it. I'd been feeling peaceful. I'd been feeling welcome. That feeling was the most frightening thing I've ever experienced, not because it was unpleasant, but because it was perfect. It was exactly the feeling that would make a person keep walking. It was exactly the feeling that would make a person set down their pack and their radio and their water. Because where they were going, they wouldn't need those things. It was the feeling of arriving somewhere you're supposed to be, and it had been manufactured, placed inside me as precisely and deliberately as a lure on a hook. I stepped back onto the main trail. The feeling didn't disappear. It receded, slowly, like a tide going out, and as it went I could feel the shape of the space it left behind, and the space was exactly the shape of the path through the trees. An Eli-shaped space, a me-shaped space. I turned around and hiked back to the trailhead. Every step was harder than the last, not because I was tired, but because the feeling kept whispering that I was going the wrong way. By the time I reached the parking lot, I was almost running. I got in my truck and drove to the motel, and sat in the shower with the hot water running until it went cold. I never went back to the trail. I drove home to Medford the next day. I told the sheriff's office what I'd found on the camera, and they sent someone to look at the photos. The deputy who came was polite and professional, and clearly thought I was a grieving brother reading too much into blurry images. He noted that photo 119 showed an indistinct figure that could be a hiker or a shadow formation, and that the remaining images were overexposed and inconclusive. The file stayed in the long-term missing persons. I still have the camera. It's in a drawer in my apartment. I don't look at the photos anymore, but I haven't deleted them either, because they're the last thing Eli made, and getting rid of them feels like erasing the last piece of him. Sometimes I open the drawer and I see the camera, and I feel it, faintly, distantly, like hearing music from another room. The warm stone, the welcome, the sense that there's a place in the forest where the trees are evenly spaced and the ground is swept clean, and the light comes down through the canopy in a bright column, and something is waiting patiently, the way the forest has always been patient, for me to come back and finish the walk my brother started. I haven't gone back, but I think about it more than I should, and the thinking has a texture to it that feels less like memory and more like direction, like a compass needle swinging toward north. And some nights I lie in bed in my apartment in Medford, and I can feel the path under my feet as clearly as if I were standing on it. And the feeling is warm, and the feeling is kind, and I know, the way you know that a cliff has an edge before you see it, that if I ever drive back to that trailhead, I won't come home. The worst part isn't the fear. The worst part is that the place my brother found doesn't sound like a terrible place. It sounds like somewhere that wants you. And the longer I sit with that, the harder it gets to remember why wanting is something to be afraid of.